I'm Ricky.
And I'm Joe, and this is Season 8, Episode 8 of the Beer and Broadband Podcast, slated to come out on June 2nd, 2025. And we're just going to get straight into it because we had a really long episode last time. This one probably will be a little bit shorter. But we're looking at the Victory Berry Monkey, a fruited, soured triple. Berry Monkey is a perfectly fruited sour triple. I don't know how to pronounce that. What does that say? Leaded, I guess, with raspberries and that had just the right twist of brightness and tang for a super smooth finish. Undeniably very good. Look, I am normally not that bad of a reader, but
It's
the
a dark
copy
label
on
with
this,
dark
it's
text.
it's just like really hard to see the black against this like weird like psychedelic background they have on it. Maybe my eyes have gotten worse. I don't know, but I can barely read that. I'm having to look like through the bottom of my glass. Oh, okay. It's easier to read in like really bright light. So, but in like I just turn it this way, just a little bit, and it makes it hard to read. Anyways, I'm detracting from talking about this beer. It's a 9.5% ABV beer, and it's supposed to be a fruited triple.
Yeah, I'm not 100% sold on this one.
Okay, I gotta try it then.
It is sweet. It definitely has some berry to it. My problem is it's a level of sweet, sour, and bitter that don't play nice together. This is not a smooth finish. I guess alcohol burn wise, yeah. Like it's not, it's not too young. It doesn't taste like green or anything like that. Mm-hmm. But it's just all those flavors combine at the same level. Like it's not like, oh, I've got my primary and secondary and tertiary and like I'm getting sweet, sour, and bitter at different levels. It just all hits.
Right.
Kind of like in the middle. It's not even like forward. So it's like, it's not possible to have only secondary flavors, but you know what I'm talking about. Like that kind of level of like, it's not when you first hit your tongue. It's not after you swallow, but like as it sits on your tongue, it's just like overstimulating.
Yeah.
And I'm not feeling that. I'm going to let it warm up though, because there may be something there. Cause like things tend to mellow as they get warmer. So like if that sweetness came out a little bit more or something like that, I could maybe see that balancing a bit better, but my first sip was like, that's something. And I took 3 or 4 more sips, and I really, truly cannot think of a better way to describe it than just that, like, all the flavors are conflicting with each other, and it's just overstimulation.
So, Victory also made this beer called Christmas Monkey that I had over Christmas. And I didn't save any. I didn't want to do it on the podcast because I did not like it. I gave most of it away. I had like a 4-pack of it. This, I just got out of the, like, build your own 6-pack.
Yeah, the mix and match.
And it kind of has the same characteristics as the Christmas Monkey. Mm-hmm. It had like a sweetness to it. It had like some juniper and stuff like that. And the Christmas Monkey and this one, it's got raspberry and all that stuff. Mm-hmm. But then it had like this odd like a funk aftertaste to it that I didn't like. Gotcha. Normally I like funky stuff. And this is kind of the same way. It's like, but it's instead of it being an aftertaste, it's like in the front.
Yeah.
Like it just kind of hits you all at once, like you said, like and sitting on the tongue and letting it just kind of sit there. So we'll see what it's like when it warms up. But right now, first taste, I can't imagine that anyone. Well, some people like really bad beer, or like I shouldn't say bad beer.
Yeah,
some people like really. Bitter, like it's not even like an IPA kind of bitterness though. Like, but some people like this particular style of beer. I just can't think of anybody that I know that would like it.
Yeah, I'll hit on that. I don't think it's necessarily a bad beer. It's definitely not for me as someone who generally is really into fruited beers. So like, I think they're gonna run into like a crisis of who's like the target audience for this. But it's not like offensive. I will finish what I have. But I definitely wouldn't order another one.
Yeah, I agree.
Though, because we always do try and look on the bright side. This might not be bad in something like a shandy. Like, you put a little more sweetness in it, you mellow it out a little bit more, maybe. I think we'll know a little bit better once it's warm if that'll play out in its favor.
Maybe. I'm not convinced it'd be good in a shandy. There's a lot of beers that I'd go to other than this for a shandy.
Oh well, yeah, definitely. I'm just saying that if there was something you could do to make this better, diluting it with something else might be the call.
Yeah, I shouldn't have said bad beer. I still like it's a bad beer to me.
Yeah,
And-
it's not.
and
It's
so-
not your beer.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
like I just it is like the Laguntus, Triplus Maximus or whatever
Mm-hmm.
the Maximus Hoppius or whatever it is, the one that's just like so bitter and like hoppy, and like I just continue to drink it, but I was doing it just so I was like I will never like I see this beer and I'm like I remember that taste.
Yeah.
This one is about at that same level for me. So like it there's just and the Christmas beer was the same way. It just was so that funky flavor to it is like off-putting for me for some reason. It kind of tastes like bad bananas almost.
Yeah.
Like a weird banana flavor in the back end. That might be why they call it Bad Monkey.
Yeah, potentially.
Who knows? But we'll try it warmed up in a little bit, and I'll finish the beer. It is probably not the worst beer I've ever had. I'm just having a strong reaction to it right now.
Mm-hmm.
So computer science and AI are the new reading and writing. Heard someone talking about this on another podcast. Again, kind of like last episode.
Yeah.
Saw an article about it that came up, and I was like, we probably should talk about that because we've got some good, perspectives here. We've grown up, both of us, at different times with computing. I kind of lived in a world without generalized computing. A lot of things were still very analog, and so then like learning to compute and learning how to use computers. Learning to use computers as I've gotten older and like having to like troubleshoot how they work and stuff like that has had an effect on my life.
Yep.
Where you kind of grew up a little bit more in a place that had more of like computers and like computer science kind of weaved into your life. But you still had to go through that same kind of journey in a lot of ways.
Absolutely.
So now people are given tablets where all the underlying operating system is abstracted from them, and they're having to learn things. There's some arguments that that's detrimental because of like screen time and stuff like that, especially with younger kids. But ultimately, much like learning how to drive a car is necessary for everyone, at least in this day and age. Computer science and knowing how to properly use an AI, how to write prompts for it and stuff like that, have kind of become necessary. Now, AI is so new that I'm not certain that it's any different than crypto.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't think we've hit a level of necessary yet. I think there are people looking into it saying, hey, we think this is going to be something necessary. And I think crypto space is actually a really good call there, because that's kind of the same way people talked about cryptocurrencies for a long time. Of like, it's going to happen. And maybe it will. I'm not saying it won't. But I think it's a little much to go as far as saying it's reading and writing. I don't think you live in a world where someone knows how to write an AI prompt but doesn't know how to read.
Right.
Or like isn't proficient in reading. Like if you've got a 5th grade reading level, but you can write a really good prompt, you're still not doing that great.
Right.
But I do think computer literacy is something that's really important. There are, because it talked about it in school. It's like, hey, you go and get a degree, this should be required. You should have to take some comp sci. You should have to take some of this. And it's like, I do kind of agree with that. I think it may be a little far to say, hey, go take comp sci 101. But almost every university or college has computer literacy programs. I mean, in fact, that actually was my university's like comp sci 101, was you had to go sit in this lecture hall where they just kind of like talked about how computers worked and like things that were happening in the industry and stuff like that. A bunch of guest speakers, things of that nature, which were always fun. But like, yeah, probably. I think everybody should be required to go take a computer literacy course. I would go as far actually as to say you should have to take 2 computer literacy courses. I think you should take what is essentially like how do electronics work. Like how does a computer at a hardware level work, and like how does a CD player work, and like how do well, maybe not CD players anymore, but you know what I'm talking about.
Right.
Like how do these technologies that you interact with every day fundamentally work at a level that helps you understand their operation and like be better at not breaking them. And then another course of like actual real operation, because I took a bunch of comp sci. I will not say it was not helpful considering I do a lot of software development now. I think it taught me more concepts than anything else because none of those languages I learned I ultimately did professionally. But another really useful class for me was actually when I took out of the business college, which was just like, hey, here's how you use a computer to do work. Like everyone gets the Office suite. Here's some basic, like your Visual Basic. Here's, how to set macros on your computer and stuff like that. And that was incredibly useful to know like how to really use Excel and how to really use, we did access databases, which you don't really need anymore. But I taught you a basic of what a database is and stuff like that. I I think if you're going to ask somebody who comes out of high school passing their reading at a level that they can get into a university, and then still ask them to go take 3 more reading classes, go take your literatures and stuff like that. Sure, everybody should take 1 to 2 computer classes, because at this point, there are not many industries that you are not going to be using a computer to do some level of work. There's industries you do less of it, but can't think of off the top of my head a single industry where you won't use a computer at all.
So I think, well, let me give you a little bit of like what my experience was.
Mm-hmm.
I had a computer at home, but we didn't use computers for hardly anything in high school, middle school, definitely not in elementary school.
Oh yeah.
I had like some advanced classes that I went to in some honors programs that did have computers in them, and we had to learn how to type and use a typewriter and do some other things like that in those courses. But in general, those weren't taught in my schools. Now, then I went to college, and because I went to a college, not a university, and I didn't complete that degree, but the first, kind of like round of education that I got that was advanced education was all centered around manual and analog things. So I was an art student. The graphics, art, and design was all about typesetting using like printing machines,
Yeah.
and not using computer. They had computers in the class. That was a different class though.
Yeah.
Computer graphics and design was not really part of what they taught in this class. And even in high school, the one computer-aided graphics class that I had wasn't in my art classes. It was in a mechanical drawing class that I had. And it was just a footnote in that. It wasn't like a big thing. So like from the time that I got out of high school until I, went into a certain part of the working world, there was like a gap of like 4 or 5 years where that stuff just exploded.
Yeah.
And it moved faster than education and things like that. And so now, from my perspective, I had to educate myself on how to use all this stuff. I didn't have a class on Excel. I had to go look up YouTube videos or, websites or something like that. And so I had to learn how to use Google first and then this other stuff. But I also had to have a good understanding and comprehension of reading and writing and stuff like that. So to give that whole story, what's the purpose, right? What's the point in the context of the things that we're talking about? From my perspective, computer science is very much like, learning a little bit of, maintenance for a house, or learning a little bit of maintenance for a car or something like that. And those are things that were optional. And there's a lot of people that didn't learn how to do those things in high school and elementary school. And if we're going to say that those are the places that are responsible for teaching us these skills, yeah, computer science needs to be taught every year, starting somewhere around middle school. Once kids have good enough grasp of math and language to be able to understand the concepts and basic concepts that are coming out from computer classes, they should absolutely be learning how to type, how to manage and maintain a computer system,
Mm-hmm.
they need to, learn how to do more than what you would do with a tablet. You know,
Yeah.
Now AI, I don't think that is even relevant. I think the article talking about that stuff and the person that was talking about that stuff is really excited about new technology. And I think the people that I've heard talking about this is like being like, oh, this is the next big thing. Everybody needs to know how to do this. It doesn't really make you more productive all the time. It can. There are
Mm-hmm.
things like Copilot for code, but you have to know what you're doing. So like,
Yeah.
it doesn't like reduce your barrier of entry and knowledge or anything like that. What it does is AI gives you extra things that you probably wouldn't have done, or they're things that you would have done at a like faster, sloppier way. Like maybe you would have done like a mock-up template or something like that. You would let somebody else like kind of work on the template or making it prettier. You'd come back to it later or something like that. It doesn't really save you any time. It just kind of streamlines some of those like repetitive task process. Or that's what I found. And
Yeah, definitely. I think that's why, like, I kind of discussed it at like a university level. I don't think because you do have technology classes now going very young. Like, my daughter has computer classes and she's in first grade.
right.
And, like, I had them growing up, so like we had computer lab as like an actual like thing you did.
Mm-hmm.
From and I was in a rural community from elementary school all the way through high school. So like I separate out like learning to type and things like that from it. I can see at a university level of like, hey, here's like true competency. We're teaching you like actual tools you'll probably use.
Mm-hmm.
Here's 2 weeks we're going to spend on AI or something like that. Because I think they can keep up a little bit better
Mm-hmm.
in that level. Because you don't have to go through all the standardizing and the stuff like that that you do for like a public education system. But I do see your point. It's so early. It's like can you really do a whole lot with it? I think you can do enough with it the average person likes it. I think you want to generate a quick image, you want to generate an email, you want to ask for a recipe, it can do pretty good. But I think you're right in the terms of professional productivity. I don't think it's there yet, except for a couple very niche scenarios. You know. So yeah, I think you should learn it. I think everybody should learn it. But I think you're right in the sense that it's not the make or break the article is telling it out to be. It's not reading and writing.
Yes,
You know.
it's not. AI is not reading and writing, and learning how to manipulate AI is not reading and writing.
Yeah. I think it's a much better take of saying, hey, if you think it's as important that people learn how to type quickly, if you think it's important that people learn how to use PowerPoint, if you think it's important that we teach like, you know, the more physical sides of a computer, of like how file structures work and things like that, you should probably also consider at this point in time, because it doesn't look like AI is going to truly go away, including some, hey, you should learn how like 3 or 4 different types of AI work.
Yeah, like maybe if they're tools within the program that you're teaching. If like Word has like Copilot in it and it's got some
I wouldn't even
generative,
go.
I
Yeah.
mean, at least like hitting on that. Like if you're teaching a class on word processors, and Word is your word processor, at least being like this is a tool that's within this. That's fine.
Sure, I was taking it a different direction. I think it serves better as a more academic topic, of just being like, okay, here is what a generative AI is. Like just how like last month I taught you what a database was and what a file system was. Now we're going to talk about this is what a Gen AI is, and as part of that, this is how you would write a good prompt. Next one, here's this type of AI. Like here's how a large language model works. Here's how you would maybe write prompts differently for that. Pros and cons. Next one. Like I
Yeah,
think
it's
at
just
that
kind of
level,
an informational topic, right?
yeah, like I don't think we need to be sitting down here and making people get really good at learning stable diffusion or something like that. But I do think at the same level of like to really be able to operate a computer well, you do kind of need to know how a file structure works.
Yes.
You do kind of need to know like what drivers are and like how the hardware interacts with the software to help you like solve problems. Like I'm a cousin of mine, computer was restarting constantly. And they were like, I guess I'm going to have to replace the power supply. I said, well, that's a bit of a step,
Yeah.
right? Like, it's just randomly powering off, but not like during anything you can figure out what it is, probably not the power supply. Like if it shut off every single time you were like really into a video game and you knew it wasn't the temperatures, okay, maybe. Like maybe it's struggling to get up to the wattage it needs. Or like if it's when you're booting it up, because that's one of the most power intensive moments.
Yeah.
Maybe. And we went down the thing, and this person is not computer illiterate. Like they're a PC gamer. They built their own computer. Like they're not, completely unaware how this stuff works. But it came like, hey, what do your crash logs show? Oh, you don't know how to check that. Let's go into Event Viewer. What are the codes? Oh, you don't know how to look up a code. Well, here's how you look up a code. And eventually we got down to like, we'd taken out a few things and said, okay, look here, unexpected. So we know from the codes that this isn't a stateful shutdown. Something's happening. There's no thermal events. There's no kernel events. So it doesn't look like a piece of software is crashing. It doesn't look like it's overheating, but it is still powering down unexpectedly. That's generally a security mechanism. That's like, I need to do something with power. I don't know what to do about it. And so I'm going to shut off to avoid accidentally frying something. So start pulling out accessories. And he was like, no. It's like, I've had these things for a while. And it's like, okay, but let's do it. Take them all out. Ran the computer for a day. Didn't put keyboard and mouse in. Didn't shut down. Eventually put everything else back in. Still didn't shut down. I was like, did you put them in the same places? It was like, I don't know. I didn't track where they were. And I said, then you've probably got a bad USB port.
Yep.
Right? And like, that's not a line of thought that you should have to be an IT technician to go down. Right? Like you shouldn't have to be able to do that professionally to be able to troubleshoot, hey, something plugged into my computer is broken.
Right.
And again, like it was total time of me even explaining what to do, probably less than 20 minutes of troubleshooting. And that's with like providing tutorials to this person. So like now the second time it happens, it probably figures it out in like 5 minutes. It's that sort of stuff that I think like we need to focus on education at like a higher level on.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, sure, primary school to grade school, like all of the public education stuff, sure, be focused on using it as a tool. But I do think if you're going to go up to a university level, just like if you're going to take that university English class, it's not about can you read at a college level. It's about can you analyze text? Can you look at subtext? Can you infer things about the things that you've read? It should be like, okay, your computer's having problems. You should know a little bit about how it works. If you keep being told you're out of memory, maybe you should know that means don't buy more RAM. It means go delete some stuff.
Right.
Yeah,
and I agree with you there. Nothing that I said like was meant to be a disagreement necessarily. I think the way that I'm looking at it as this is a holistic thing that we all need to know.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there are people, they start learning about things from their parents at young ages. Your parents should be passing on some of their knowledge about like how they do their jobs and stuff like that, right? With the same thing, at younger ages, we start learning about things when it comes to reading and writing and math and science and things like that. And those are all like important things. We should start including computers in that. And we are, right? But maybe we aren't teaching a kid what a file system is. Yeah. And that probably is important because by the time they get to something like college, they shouldn't be learning that in college. They should learn all that stuff. Do they need to know how to write a prompt for an AI, before they get to university? Probably not.
Yeah.
If they want to learn that, they can learn that on their own, or if you've got an advanced AP class that maybe teaches some of that stuff, cool. If you want them to go to like a college program that's like a high school college, you get some college credits kind of thing by the time you graduate high school, cool. They can learn that there. Do you want to teach that in like a university kind of computer science? Like, absolutely. Does everyone in university need to know that? Maybe if AI's gotten to that point at then, but right now, no.
Yeah.
So it's not, the article is off there, but I think that where they're coming from is, do you need to know computer science and do you need to know it well? some parts of it you do. You need to know how to put oil in your car. You need to know what a
Mm-hmm.
file system is on a computer. You need to know how to read an error log on a computer.
Yeah.
Everybody needs to do that. It's not up to just the IT tech. That just at this point, everyone needs to do it because there's not enough people out there doing IT anymore and learning this stuff. Either everyone needs to know it, or we need to make it so that it doesn't like that. You just can't break these things. You know, you have
Yeah.
immutable file systems and you have immutable other things like that.
Yeah, that's a nightmare.
Yeah, exactly.
You can't delete anything anymore. Oh, you filled up your space. Go buy a new tablet.
Yeah, exactly. Or you can't install anything. You know, it's just
Yeah.
everything exists in these like cloud locations where only the people that know how to do these things manage them. You know, which I think is also a nightmare,
Yeah.
and I wouldn't want that to exist. So 100 terabyte hard drive, not a 20 terabyte, not a 30 or a 40. I mean, we actually have like these SSDs that are, but we're talking about spinning rust.
Yeah.
You know, 100 terabyte hard drive on the way. Supposed to be here soonish within like the next 5 years.
Yeah, I believe it.
Not only do I believe it, I'm looking forward to this future because that means that a 20 terabyte hard drive comes down significantly in price, hopefully, and we're not spending $500-600 on a 20 terabyte hard drive or a 22 terabyte
Yeah.
hard drive. You're spending so that like where 6 to 8 terabyte hard drives are, they're like around $100. So hopefully it gets down to like you know $100-200 for a hard drive. That's
Yeah.
in the space like where 12 terabyte hard drives are now. And man, I could like for $100 getting a bunch of 12 terabyte hard drives at $100. Woo! I could put a hurting on a storage server.
Oh yeah, yeah, exactly. Like I don't think people will be buying the hundreds anytime soon. But you're right. That's hopefully mean that the larger, more expensive storage today is 5 years from now much cheaper.
Right.
You know, you go buy your next gaming computer and you're putting in 50 terabytes of storage in it. That's going to fix our every video game is 400 gigs now. You know,
that is a completely different thing, but yes.
but it's also
absolutely.
like one of the reasons why. But it's like it's media, right? Like
Yeah.
we've now hit a level of storage need that's purely because of the bloat of the media that we consume.
Right.
Like 20 years ago, people could not fathom the need for 1 terabyte. Like that was a fantasy number. They're like, oh, I'm writing a story that's sci-fi that takes place in 2130, and we have 1 terabyte hard drives that are crystals. You know, like we only need stuff this big because of how high resolution our video is nowadays, how bloaty our video games are, how high fidelity our music is. Like, and those aren't necessarily bad things, right? Like, I'm not saying 4K videos shouldn't exist, but it is. Let's be serious. No one's buying the 20 gig, 20 terabyte hard drive because they're like, I just do a lot of documents.
I mean, it's true. Nobody's trying like doing something like that. Well, they might. So you might get a set of 20 terabyte hard drives, put them into some sort of array, so that you have backup for like a large file server, like of PDFs and things like that.
Sure, but even then, that's a lot of PDFs.
That is a lot of PDFs, and it's generally like, you've got it between like multiple users and stuff.
Yeah,
like
exactly.
That.
Like you're getting
Like in a
into
small
like
business.
company.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I could see like I could see someone now like that runs like a small business or something like that, having that like maybe in their house, to back up stuff or something like that. I don't know, but going to video games, that's a lot of that is just lazy. Hey,
Yeah.
we don't have to compress it, so let's not.
Yeah.
Kind of crap. It's not necessary that you have to have FLAC for your audio and video games. You probably can do Vorbis and it would be just fine. And that, I mean, as I've learned from doing my own transcoding, if you change it to Vorbis, like the compression on it is so small, and you don't like, because of the way that movies and everything work, if you get it right, that means that your audio is the thing that's taking up most of your space, not your video. And so a 2-hour movie goes from being like 10 gigs to 4, 3, and that's a huge space savings. So like, it is literally just, we are doing this for this reason, right? Like we're doing this and we're pushing this off on you, and maybe you don't need all of that, like the crispest, the this, the that.
Mm.
You know, I have just as much of a good time watching Red Dwarf in 480p as I do in 1080p. Yeah, it looks a little bit better in 1080p, and I don't have a problem with having it in 1080p. But I can't really tell the difference between the Vorbis track and the FLAC track.
Yeah.
You know, or something like that. And so, it, when it comes to storage, those things, that's solvable in other ways. Like you can get something like TDAR or something like that, and just like transcode your whole media library to be like this, this, and this, and it's beautiful, right? And then you just kind of move on with your life.
Yeah.
That is not necessarily why you're going to have these big storage sizes, right? Like I kind of keep a Steam cache. I like having my most used video games, the ones that I tend to download the most, or people come over to my house and download the most. I like having them kind of backed up because I have a bunch of gaming computers, right? Yeah. This is what something like this is going to be used for, you know, because video games are so big. But even if not, like if you're just trying to keep a good copy of all of your Steam games, like your Balatro, your this, that, you've got a media server, you want that all in like a shared location. Having drives like this on different pools or in the same pool will make a huge deal. So I think, well, 20 terabyte, you know.
Yeah.
Like there are reasons that a person at home would have large drives, you know, like 12 terabyte.
But to be fair, even in all of your own examples, it's to storage very large pieces of media. It becomes because your video game is so large. And again, that's not a take on the video game. It's just we're hitting a level of storage now that if you didn't have that use case, you know, you don't have media to store. Maybe you just stream all your stuff or whatever. There's going to be a 20 gig hard drive available, and that will someday be the standard to install on your computer, and you're going to use 0.1% of it.
Yes.
It's kind of the interesting arm race I was trying to highlight of we're chasing storage needs. The same thing with compute. Like there's going to be a huge push for probably more and more compute on both the graphics card and the CPU going forward because people really want to install local AIs on their machines. You know, so like you're going to hit a use case where it's like, okay, here's like the new standard work computer. It's, you know, $1,500 and it does all this AI stuff and it's got this huge hard drive in it that you can like generate images with. Because another reason why you might want a lot of storage space if you're doing a lot of like image generation with an AI, place to store all those high fidelity images. And it's like, oh, you don't do any of that? Oh, you're looking to check email? Here's a $100 computer. It's gonna be so cheap now. Of just like it has only 500 gigs of data, but I guess you probably won't need it, and it's got just only a 6-core CPU.
Right.
You know, like it's going to become interesting because I already look at like computers like my dad buys, who he doesn't really do anything serious with, and already, you know, he can get a computer that's actually good for him for only $500-600.
Yeah.
But even then, it's like okay, but like if it was a $900 computer, it would work a little bit better for you. Like you don't need the super expensive thing, but like, you know, you're at least enough of a power user that you're kind of like in the middle. But as we push really hard into these like larger storage, larger compute for AI and stuff, it's going to become like a valley of difference.
Yes.
Yeah, definitely. You become that old person who all they do is, you know, check email and watch videos on YouTube and stuff like that on their computer, and suddenly like, you know, they just might not even make laptops for that anymore. That might then solely become a tablet game
thing. Yeah.
Of like, no, you can't. We're not going to build a $150 computer. What we'll do is you can go buy a tablet, and when you're ready to start doing the bigger stuff, then, you know, minimum price point $800 or whatever, and it's got your 10 terabytes and all that stuff.
Right. And just to be clear, what I was saying is I agree with you that like for home use, everything's media that's driving like larger amounts. It's video games, movies, stuff like that. You can solve the problem of the bloat that comes in those things and just use your space more efficiently by using something like TDAR or, you know, like proper compression for your audio and stuff like that, where even with that, eventually you're going to need something that's like, you know, like 100 terabytes or something in your home, because these video storage sizes or you're going to want, I shouldn't say need, if you're storing your own media, audio is not going to get much bigger. Audio's like tracks for audio, we pretty much figured that out. They're going to be at this size for however long the rest of our lives probably. It's, video games, video files, images, image generation, LLMs, stuff like that. They're going to drive storage, like you were saying. And the only reason that someone might need like a bunch of 20 terabyte hard drives that aren't for some example like that would be some sort of business purpose. Like they've got a backup business. They've got a small business they own. They're running the company out of their home. They've got a backup business server maybe here or, here in someplace else or something like that. Anyways, so I'm excited about it. I welcome it. Let's talk about AI writing the state bar exam. And I figure this will be a quick one that we won't spend 3 hours talking about, but
don't challenge me.
I'm welcome. I'm welcome to talk about this because this hits a little bit of both of our thing.
Yeah.
I have some background in legal stuff, and you definitely have background in, both of us have backgrounds in tech. So let's talk about this a little bit.
Here's the thing. I'm not against the idea. I am against execution. And, in the information that we have, there's not, we don't know exactly what's going on. It's not like someone went in and blew the lid off of how this was generated, and we know every single parameter that it went through. But here is my issue. And we've talked about testing a couple times in this podcast. Even before AI, we just kind of talked about like you're outsourcing the people making your tests and stuff like that. You can get much lower quality tests, and you need a lot of checks and balances there to make them good. I think it's totally okay to have an AI write your exam if you start off and you say something like, okay, we're going to have, here's the structure of the exam. A certain percentage of my question pool is going to be this topic, and you pick, all those things out so that you know like what percentage everything's supposed to be. You have it go generate that exam for you. And then every single question, you have a bunch of people read over to make sure it's a good question and correct. And then you go give it to sample students, and they pass it at an expected rate compared to the previous written exam version.
Yeah, totally.
There's definitely enough guardrails you can put on this that this truly is kind of just saving some people some busy work. Because I think there is definitely some human bias in exam taking. You see that in all sorts of industry exams, especially ones that have people who already have the exam at the highest level, generate questions. You can find all sorts of biases of topics people believe are important, or they're going to pick things that they know better because maybe that's the stuff they're exposed to more in their professional career and stuff like that. So a truly random take of hey, here's my official sources, which, let's be fair, for legal are very well documented.
Right.
This isn't like I'm trying to write an exam off of something that's maybe a bit more freeform, like English. It's hey, here's the code, and here's maybe an additional 100 particular cases we think are kind of important. But while I think a world exists that you could get a really good exam out of it, that's a lot of work. I don't necessarily trust people who are turning to AI to do. Right? Did all of those things happen?
Yeah.
How many questions got through that maybe didn't have the best review? Or worse, did questions make it to students before they were given in mock exam formats where you could be sure students are going to read it right? Because there's also biases in reading something, right? If you read a question and you're a lawyer with 30 years of experience and you knew an AI made it and you knew the source material it made it from, maybe you read that question in a little bit of a different context than someone coming to it fresh, So I guess that's where I draw that line. If they said that they did it in a cool ethical way, and I'm are you sure? I'm not saying you didn't, but I am saying that the level of this being okay varies a whole lot on what your methodology was.
So my understanding, and I agree with everything that you just said, my understanding of what they did was they had an exam pool. They had, let's say it was 100 questions. 50 of those questions were written by humans, and then there was 30 that had come from another exam thing that they had done, and those were also written by humans.
Yeah.
And then they had that 20 questions or 20% that they had fed in previous exam questions, and so they had all this documentation, write something like this, and it did, and it was just writing different takes on same questions that they were just trying to make fresh, reworded, so that they're not as stale. And I could be a little bit wrong on some of those details because some of that's a little bit obfuscated. The problem is they didn't have those checks and balances. They just kind of threw it out there.
Mm.
They didn't warn the students that some of these questions would be written by AI. So, I mean, this kind of goes back to a different topic where you're making things difficult just because you're saying this should be difficult and it should be hard for you to get this. Therefore, I'm making it difficult, not because the subject is necessarily difficult.
Yeah.
It's IP addressing is not an easy subject for anyone, right? And then adding difficulty on top of it just because, well, it was difficult for me, so it has to be difficult for you.
Mm-hmm.
Just because somebody gets IP addressing doesn't mean that they're necessarily going to pass an exam, and just because they understand how it works like at like an intuitive level doesn't mean, same thing with law. The fact that you maybe just like read something, you're like, oh, that clicks with me, you're able to remember that really well, and just like every question that comes out about it you just kind of ace, doesn't mean that an exam's not hard.
Yeah.
It just means that this person gets it, and maybe 10 people out of 20 get it. So like 50% of people get it because they've been exposed to something like that, or they kind of understand it, or it's a little bit more intuitive. That is not a problem. So like trying to like amp the difficulty up just because of that, or trying to like make it so that people have to quote unquote not know just the written works, but they also have to like be intuitive and like be able to apply those things. And then giving them like these like convoluted scenarios that don't like make sense or anything like that, and then saying like this is real world, and you're not going to run into any like real world scenarios like that, right? That's the sort of stuff that I took reading between the lines that this created.
Yeah.
And so like it was just this convoluted mess of stuff that no one like really went and looked at.
And that's the real problem. Like another article says like, oh, all the questions got reviewed by somebody, but like that's not necessarily enough.
Right.
Because I think you're right to that extent. Oh, I read this. If I know like what answer it's looking for, I know that yes, that's factually correct, and I know like maybe there's not any grammar issues with it or something like that. But you're 100% right. There comes a level where, I'm going to over exaggerate here, but if your car accident question about maybe who's in what sort of legal trouble based on how an accident occurs, and one of them's a clown car that there's 20 clowns in, and it's like, oh, but did you know that in New York City, if there's more than 12 passengers in a vehicle, it's supposed to count as a bus, and because you weren't a bus, it's a different thing. Like what I'm saying? It's like, you're right. If you're putting people in scenarios that are they're starting to become outside of the norm, or being presented in ways that don't feel normal, you are making the exam artificially difficult. Because it's like, if it does not line up with real world experience, sure, you can say, hey, the law's still the law. But if you had that same example and it wasn't, hey, there's 20 people packed into a sedan, and it was actually someone's taken their work van and put a bunch of seats in it, and now it holds 15 people, that tickles a different part of your brain, a different way to think about it than what is the not actual possible thing,
Right, and to your point, if you're taking the Ohio State bar exam and they're asking you questions about New York law, that is, unless it's like some well-documented case that Ohio's law cites, that's not necessarily
oh yeah,
relevant.
Definitely. Yeah, I mean, they're different bar exams for a reason.
Yeah, exactly. So like you're learning to practice law in the state of Ohio, not learning to practice law in the state of New York. And AI doesn't necessarily always know those contexts.
Yeah, the hallucinations and stuff like that, of like what someone's there. Yeah.
So,
or exactly what we talked about before, not good enough bounds on what's the material you're using.
Exactly. If you're pulling in stuff from like LexisNexis and you're just pulling in everything and it's learned on all that stuff, that's good for like going and asking it questions like, hey, I got a speeding ticket. And I was going 5 miles over, and I got I've got a fine like here of like $50. What could I do to like lower my fine or something like that? That's going to be pretty general in most states. Like if it hallucinates a little bit or pulls some information from one state to another, you can back that up with some pretty easy fact checking. On the other hand, if you're talking about a bar exam where you have to know like who is getting I'm forgetting the word right now, but the person that is responsible for the damages, if you're the person that is responsible for damages in a lawsuit where somebody like crashed into a house, and it was because of a set of circumstances that happened, and you're having to like it's convoluted, and you're having to figure out who's responsible for the damages. Is it the company that made the vehicle, or the company that made the part that the
Mm-hmm.
vehicle went
Yep.
into? Is it the person that was driving the vehicle because they should have known, even though they hadn't had a recall happen, not to drive in this kind of condition? Or is it the person who owned the house for having their house in a certain position and not like putting guardrails up or something
Yeah.
like that? Like they're just all these like
It
complicated
does. Yeah,
things.
it gets difficult, especially because I don't know how it works in the bar exam, but there's a guy on YouTube I like to watch. He's a personal injury lawyer
Mm-hmm.
who goes into that. It's like, hey, there's been an accident. There's like five different parties you could make an argument or involved in this. And what a lot of lawyers do is they'll hit all five,
Mm-hmm.
but that's a lot of one. It costs you a lot more money because now you're suing five people, but also because all it takes is like one of those people to kind of say like, okay, I had a little bit of a fault. Here's $5,000 for the other four to say, oh, you were compensated.
Yes.
So like what you really need to be doing is find out who actually is the one most responsible, because then you can hit them harder.
Right.
Because then there's not going to be someone who's just like, oh, yeah, I guess there was a recall on those brake pads. Here's $4,000, and you're out. For instead of being like, oh, actually, this, what was I'm trying to think of a good one he had once, where like there was a known issue in a vehicle, but like the recall had not been served. It was like an issue with like the steering wheel or something. And it's like, now that's not a part issue. That's like, why didn't you receive your recall notification? Why did they know about it for like, it looked like 6 months and they hadn't reached a recall yet? Now I can get you in a class action. The class action will be a lot better, stuff like that. You're right. It's a complicated topic. So like, I kind of cringe at what you said of the like, oh, they just wanted to freshen up some questions. It's like, that's not what you should be doing.
Yeah, that is not what they should be doing
Yeah.
it for. And I could be wrong a little bit about some of those 100% details, but that's what I understood.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
if that's the situation, that's absolutely the wrong way to do that. Now, I do think that AI could be used in a positive way right now to write or prepare some questions. And the reason I say that is I think you could take something like a format. You could say, hey, I'm going to do this, and I need to write like 10 questions. They need to be in this format. They need to have this many multiple choice, or they need to be a free-form written question. And I would like for you to take these 10 questions that I've written, change the grammar on them so that they are correct grammar, and then help me find 4 distractors to each one. I have the correct answer as B. Give me 4 other things.
Yeah.
And then like you could go back and like kind of zhuzh up like questions that you've created that way, but that still requires a human to create them right now.
Yeah.
I don't think AI is quite there yet. But like if you had something that was more like a technical explanation for something, AI is really good at taking something that's like a summary and like, or something that's like a large document, say, hey, this paragraph says what this is. Write me a 2-sentence summary of that, and it'll do that, and that's pretty good. So like, I think there's ways that these tools could be used. I just think that they were using them inappropriately. And I think that's
probably 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and legally, these things would have been good too. Like the AI writing distractors, the AI giving examples
That's actually
of
a
things.
great example of like, hey, I've written this question. Here's the right answer. Give me 4 more things that are wrong answers, but sound like they could be right.
Exactly. Exactly.
That's, in all honesty, a great use case for
Yeah.
AI in exams.
Yeah.
Because I struggle way more on coming up with what's a reasonable not right as compared to like you took some of the quizzes I'd give. I'd always have to throw in almost like a joke one, because it's like I can't come up with 4 things that are kind of close to right but aren't right.
Well, I mean, I've had to do this professionally. Like I did that for like 2 years. I haven't done it this year, but it's hard, man.
Yeah.
I did not get compensated well for the amount of effort that I was putting into that. And by the end of it, I was just like, man, I will put anything out here. I do not care. Like I find something that kind of fits in this, and like the criticisms I'd get is like, well, this is this is too hard, or this is too easy. It sounds too much like the correct answer. And I'm like, look, You don't understand the topic here
Yeah.
if you're telling me that, because it's not like there's 5 different types of IP addresses. There's only 2. We only have 2 different types of IP addressing. I can't like
Well, you got private and public and party and participation and prehistoric. And
they're all IPv6 or IPv4. There's nothing else.
what about IPv5? Throw them in there.
Yeah.
That's the real test. Okay, IPv2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Which one?
Which one is it? Yeah. But anyways, yeah. So I think this could have been good, but I think that the people that did it just were off the mark. And it would have been like a good example of how AI was being properly used. But of course, that wouldn't really be news, so we probably would have never heard about it, because people are using AI every day properly with good faith and not being scumbags about it. Anyways, so do you have anything else you want to say about that? You want to check out the warm beer?
We'll check out the beer.
All right. I saw you take a sip of it a minute ago. Mine's still a little cool, but it's warmed up considerably from when we brought it up here.
Yeah, mine as well. Still don't like it, but it is better. It's not as overwhelming. The sweetness comes out a little bit more. The sourness comes out a little bit more. And being sweet and sour heavy with a little bit of bitter is way more tolerable than almost like an even mix of all of them. But it's still not great. It's still, the problem is it still is very overwhelming, and that all the flavors kind of happen at the exact same time.
I'm not getting as much of that funky banana flavor that I was describing at the beginning that I didn't like. I actually like this better as a warmer beer.
Yeah, it is better warm, but I still don't think it's good.
No, it's not good. I don't want this beer. I'm glad I only got one. I'm glad we're drinking it now, and I'll never have to drink it again. As a matter of fact, Victory might be off my list of beers to get.
Maybe. I think when we pulled this one out, I was like, everyone loves a redemption arc. And unfortunately, we just didn't quite get it.
No, it was the villain the whole time. They Osmandianist us, whatever, from
Osmondeus or whatever it is.
Yeah. I slaughtered that joke, but you get what I'm saying.
Yep.
I do think that there is someone out there that would like this beer. If you love sours, try it warm, or at least like 50 degrees, 45 degrees. But don't, like, if you love sours, don't expect for it to be the best sour that you've ever had.
Yeah, I'm a little on the fence with that, because like I feel like I am the target audience for this beer, and I don't like it. Like, I love a fruit beer, I love a sour. I love like a lighter wheat beer type of thing. Like, they're just not crossing at the right section. I feel like it's like, like a Venn diagram where just they're not overlapping in quite the right spot.
Yes, it's like up here and it's supposed to be here.
Yeah, it's like, or it's like it's like a pie chart, and it's like it's where I could maybe take an even third of everything. It's just like a little off tilter. I'm sure there's someone who will like it. There's no beer anyone that's ever crafted that just no one will like, because if nothing else, probably the person who crafted it and decided to sell it liked it. Right. But it's hard for me to nail down a person, because like looking at it before you told me that you didn't like the one you tried before, I was like, that just seems like a beer I'd love.
Yeah.
Because it's fruit and sour and a little bit of funk, and that's kind of my thing. I love those. Just doesn't quite hit it.
While it's not necessarily always my thing, because like the darker beers, I do like a good fruit and good sour beer, and when they're combined, I like that. And I like shandies and stuff like that. I think especially during summer, they're like really nice and crisp and refreshing. This one it's got that weird aftertaste. It's got it's for somebody. It's not for me. Maybe if you like Budweiser and sours mixed together, this is like your thing. But it's not like mine. It's not my thing. It's not my thing at all. And of course not your thing. So anyways, you want to say anything else about that? I don't want to cut you off.
Decently crafted, just not great flavor.
So this has been Beer and Broadband Season 8, Episode 8, slated to come out on June 2nd, 2025. Another hour-long episode for tantalizing listeners to hear. And thank you so much for joining us, and we'll catch you next time.